Off the coasts of Tamriel, tracing the distant horizon, bewildered locals spotted pirate ships. When the vessels drew closer, curiosity warped into terror for the men and mer gathered on the shores. These ships were not Tamrielic. Their sails were unrecognizable, and beneath them, manning the decks, were bizarre and horrifying beasts. They were unlike any creatures these early inhabitants had seen before. Some had rat-like features, and others appeared canine, but all seemed feral, wild, and hostile. These early rumours were equivocal, but they suggested the existence of Akaviri cultures as yet undiscovered, or perhaps even extinct. This would be the first of many encounters the peoples of Tamriel would have with the races of Akavir. Whenever they appeared, it spelled trouble for Tamriel. For a man or mer to feel fear at the sight of an Akaviri ship is justified, because Akavir is a land of beasts. No man or mer lived there. They say men once lived there, but they were devoured long ago by the vampiric serpent folk of Tsaesci. The remaining subservient races, like the goblins of the surrounding isles, were enslaved and harvested for their blood. The continent is as merciless as it is mysterious, and when the races of Akavir are not attempting to invade Tamriel, they are warring amongst themselves. Hey guys, it's Drew here and welcome back to Fudge Muppet. Of all the lands of Nirn, none are as alien as the dragon land called Akavir. The inhabitants of this continent have featured many times throughout Tamrielic history, yet to this day, scarce little is known about them. In this video, we're going to learn all we possibly can about Tamriel's neighbour in the east. We'll explore its nations, races, cultures and history. Let's get started. In ancient times, long before imperial scholars kept records of key events, the closest thing we had to histories were songs and stories. The legend of Lyrisius is one of these epic stories. It may have happened, it may be entirely fabricated, or it may be heavily embellished. But even the most unlikely tales have some root in reality. There's no smoke without fire, and in the story of Lyrisius, there's no shortage of fire, as it spews in torrents from the maw of a mighty worm. Lyrisius' origins are not specified. We only know that he is a hero from Tamriel, and he battled an army of Akaviri slave traders. He was a renowned warrior and single-handedly slew hundreds of foes, but his valor wasn't enough to turn the tide of battle, as his army was routed and sent fleeing into the four winds. The Akaviri forces rode chariots and pursued Lyrisius, forcing him to retreat into the moors. Lyrisius fled the lands of men and entered the blasted lands. While not explicitly specified, this is almost certainly a reference to Akavir the Dragonland. At the heart of this forsaken landscape he met the worm. The great scaly beast mocked the mighty blows of Lyrisius' enchanted spear. It melted the shield fear-struck, gift of the Daedra Boethia, with a single blast of its fiery breath. Lyrisius, seeing that he could not defeat the creature by force of arms, surrendered. Preying on the beast's pride, Lyrisius appeared humble before it, offering to be the worm's slave and manservant. Lyrisius hatched a brilliantly audacious plan. He noticed the worm was meticulous about self-grooming, for its scales shone like oiled steel. But there was one lone scale centered between the beast's great wings that was out of reach and was thus dull and tarnished. The worm, conceited as only dragons can be, was mortified by the prospect of his unsightly scale, and lowered a wing for its manservant to climb so that he might polish the scale. Once astride the great lizard, Lyrisius slid his dagger underneath the scale and into the tender flesh of the beast. Though it spun and twisted in all directions, the worm could not get at the hero. Finally it took to the air. Lyrisius clung to the neck with all his strength as the worm banked, rolled and dove. Seeing that Lyrisius could not be shaken free, the worm demanded that he remove the stinging blade. Lyrisius answered, "Fly straight on until you see a great army. Destroy that army and I will remove my blade." With a great roar, the scaled creature set off. The Akaviri army had no chance against the fire-breathing beast. They have never plagued Tamriel since. The battle was won, but as soon as he freed the worm, he would be devoured or worse. He pulled the blade free and leapt from the beast's back. The worm made chase, diving after the plummeting mortal. Only Lyrisius was saved by Boethia. It would seem the hero's deeds had impressed the Prince of Battle, and he was granted Boethia's favour, becoming his champion. Lyrisius transformed into a raven, sleek and agile. He quickly lost the worm in the clouds. The fate of the worm isn't known, but if the rumours are true, the worm still lives, and like many of Akavir's natives, it nurses a grudge against all mankind after Lyrisius's deception. The beast vowed never to trust two-legged weapon bearers again. Akavir means Dragonland, and it's believed that all dragons came from this continent, though some tales claim dragons also came to Tamriel from the northern continent of Atmora. Anyone with any knowledge of Tamriel's history knows that the dragons were among the most mighty and prosperous races to grace the continent. They are huge and powerful, intelligent and gifted in magic, as well as susceptible to the romantic feelings of pride and melancholy. They were created in Akatosh's own image, and would argue this fact in justifying their superiority over the other races of Tamriel. With all of this in mind, we can appreciate just how savage the land of Akavir is. In Akavir, it is rumoured that the dragons were entirely wiped out, hunted to extinction by the Tsaesci snake men. The Akaviri Dragon Guard, which would serve as the precursor to the blades of the Cyrodiilic Empire, hunted the dragons with astounding efficiency and skill. Meanwhile on Tamriel, the men of Skyrim were subjugated and ruled over by dragons for most of the Malefic era. When the Nords rose up in revolt, thousands upon thousands died, and the Dragon War was only won when some dragons defected to the side of men. We may not know nearly as much about Akavir as we do about Tamriel, but every detail we have points to one thing. The races of Akavir are formidable and dangerous, and the races of Tamriel should thank the gods every day for the ocean between them and the Dragon Land. So, if we're going to delve into the races of Akavir, what better place to start than with the race responsible for systematically slaying the dragons, the Tsaesci snake folk. This also happens to be the race we have the most solid, reliable information on. The nation of Tsaesci means Snake Palace, and it was once the strongest power in Akavir before the Tiger Dragon came. The serpent folk ate all the men of Akavir a long time ago, but still kind of look like them. They are tall, beautiful, if frightening, covered in scales and immortal. Though sources vary on the true appearance of the Tsaesci, some say they are humanoid, others say they have human heads and arms and the lower body of a snake. Some say they're actually entirely serpent from head to tail, but the iconic Tsaesci armour which inspired the unique style of the Imperial blades, and the skeletons and spectres seen over the eras in Tamriel, would suggest that the Tsaesci were bipedal and much more human-like in physique. They are said to fight without shields, using only swords, specifically their daikatana blades. Of the 3 Akaviri invasions, 2 of which hitting the shores of Tamriel, the Tsaesci are responsible for the first. This would go down as the most famous interaction between the 2 continents. In the 2703rd year of the First Era, Tsaesci forces invaded Tamriel from the north, landing in Skyrim before fighting their way south, deeper into the mainland. The invading snake men made it as far as the Jural Mountains, where they were crushed by the might of Riemann Cyrodiil, who had rallied the armies of Kalovia and Nibene under his banner. The Akaviri army surrendered. Legend holds that the Tsaesci hordes heard Riemann's voice and fell to their knees, swearing their lives to him, and proclaimed him Dragonborn. Riemann incorporated these Tsaesci warriors into his empire, serving as the nucleus of his army. An organization named the Dragon Guard was born from the best and wisest Tsaesci soldiers, and they served the Emperor directly. This Dragon Guard would eventually become the Blades. The Tsaesci would even rule the Empire during a period known as the Akaviri Potentate, and one of these potentates, Versailles Shea, founded the Fighters Guild. The first of these ruling potentates once sparred the son of Riemann Cyrodiil III, Prince Juliek. This was before the Tsaesci laid claim to the Ruby Throne, back when being a potentate meant being an advisor to the human emperors. In their battle, we get a detailed description of the way the snake men fought. There was a collective intake of breath at the sight of his graceful movements. His swords seemed to be a part of him, a tail coming from his arms to match the one behind him. It was a trick of counterbalance, allowing the young serpent man to roll up into a circle and spin into the center of the ring in an offensive position. This source would support the descriptions of Tsaesci as being very serpent-like in physique. Over the centuries, Tsaesci lineages were gradually bred out, especially after the fall of the Akaviri Potentate. Tsaesci family names still exist in Cyrodiil, but notable racial traits were assimilated long ago. 800 years later, in the Second Era 572, a second Akaviri invasion would take place, but this time by a different Akaviri race. the Kamal snow demons. The eponymous nation Kamal means snow hell, and the legions of demons residing there spend the winter frozen solid. But when summer comes, they thaw out with the sole intention of invading their neighbours, the Tang Mo. The Tang Mo would always manage to stave off the attacks, which likely played a part in the Kamal's change in strategy. Under the leadership of their king Adasum der Kamal, the snow demons invaded Tamriel, once again choosing to enter the continent from Skyrim. Sources claim the Kamal were in search of a personal object named the Ordained Receptacle. Windhelm was sacked, and then the demons crossed the border to Morrowind. Here they warred with Nords, Dark Elves and Argonians, before finally being wiped out by a tidal wave summoned by the living god Vivek. Remnants of the Kamal popped up a few centuries later in Cyrodiil, but were quickly wiped out again. Seemingly the most amicable of the Akaviri races are the Tang Mo people of the Thousand Monkey Isles. These monkey folk of all shapes and sizes are described as kind, brave and simple, not the kind to mount full-scale invasions of foreign lands. When they aren't busy fending off assaults from the snow demons, they're keeping to themselves. The Kamali are the Tang Mo's primary adversaries, but it's said that the Tsaesci are just as adamant about enslaving them. Though they were once enemies, mysterious Akavir claims that the Tang Mo monkeys have actually formed an alliance with another Akaviri race, the Capotan tiger folk. And that brings us to the race I believe may be the new superpower in Akavir, the Capotan. Capotan means Tiger Dragon's Empire, and as the name suggests, rumours have crossed the ocean to Tamriel that these catfolk have discovered a means to become dragons. To what extent this rumour is literal remains a mystery, for neither the Tang Mo nor the Capotan have ever been seen by modern Tamrielic scholars. Certainly skeptics will claim it is a metaphorical transformation, as mortals can't simply learn to become dragons. But stranger things have happened. The catfolk of Capotan are ruled by their divine leader Toshraka, the tiger dragon. Under his reign, the Capotan have apparently become the strongest empire in Akavir, exceeding the long-standing dominance of the Tsaesci snakes. The serpent folk, however, remain the most powerful at sea, but will that matter if the tiger dragons learn to master the sky? Sometime after the Tsaesci consumed the races of men living in Akavir, they attempted to do the same to the dragons, hunting them near to extinction. Before they could completely wipe the dragons from the dragon land, some survivors sought refuge in the tiger dragon's empire, and a war was waged between snakes and tigers. Both sides fought to the bloody end. Both sides weakened greatly, but it seems as though Toshraka learned some secrets from the dragon refugees before they were wiped out entirely. Toshraka is said to be the first of the Capotan to successfully transform into a dragon, and now he is the largest dragon in all of Nirn, striped orange and black, full of ambition. When the Tsaesci are destroyed completely, he plans to lead his tiger dragon army across the water to take Tamriel in a wash of fire and blood. The grim reality for Tamriel is that they will likely only discover more about Akavir when one of their races inevitably decides to mount a new invasion. There's very little the people of Tamriel can do except wait. The Empire is faltering, the Dominion have their own priorities for domestic expansion, and the times where the living gods could rescue Tamriel from the brink of defeat are long gone. In the middle of the Third Era, Emperor Uriel Septim V set his sights on Akavir, taking the full force of Cyrodiil's navy across the sea, but the conquest was an unmitigated disaster. Akavir had not been kind to the invading men, and it seemed the very elements were against them. Storms ravaged supply lines, communications were severed, and the Tsaesci snake men were scrupulous in their destruction of the Empire's army. Reports suggest that Uriel Septim V was not as fortunate as Riemann had been in ancient times, and the snakes did not bow before him and praise him as Dragonborn. The few survivors of the expeditionary force told of a heroic last stand by the Emperor and the 10th Legion, which allowed a remnant of the 14th to retreat. Two survivors of the 10th arrived in Septimia that night, having slipped through the enemy lines during their undisciplined victory celebration. These men confirmed having seen the Emperor die, cut down by enemy arrows as he rallied the 10th's shield wall. And so, while the powers of Tamriel whittle each other down until they are blunt and brittle, the foreign forces of Akavir seem only to be growing in strength. In a mortal's limited perspective, the Aldmeri Dominion may seem like the greatest threat, or perhaps from another point of view it's the Stormcloaks. But I'd wager that the true danger lies in the east, not in Morrowind or Blackmarsh, but far away in the east, beyond the horizon, in the land of beasts and dragons, in mysterious Akavir. And there you have it, guys, a collection of all the information we have on the alien continent of Akavir. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks so much for watching. I've been Drew, and I'll catch you in the next one.